is this taming of the ego. Like the ego is a crazy thing, right? Like, I mean, the ego is what gets everyone in trouble, like no doubt. But what fascinates me with the ego is that the ego, in my personal experience, is built solely on insecurity, right? Like the more insecure I am, the bigger my ego and that, fear reaction gets. And I think that's one of the craziest things ever. How does somebody come across as being arrogant and self-confident who's filled with insecurity? Like, it's like when your parents used to say they just make fun of you to make themselves feel better. And it's like, how is that? But when you think about social media and you think about kind of consumerism, like all this stuff, there's no better ego feed. Yeah. Everybody looks better in pictures. Everybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, everybody can write eloquently if they can go back and have the ability to edit. I don't have the ability to edit what comes out of my mouth right now. I should work on that.
Welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook, the podcast where we welcome business leaders, CEOs, and industry experts to discuss the rise to the top, building wealth, and real estate insights. Here's your host, Jeremy Spann.
So, listeners and viewers, welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook. You can either watch or listen to this, and if you need more information, go to myexperiencedrealtor.com. You can find out information on our guests, download their episodes, watch their episodes, and see great guests like Brinton Payne. How are you doing, my friend?
You don't have that applause button? What happened?
Oh, yeah. I only wish I had that.
For sure.
I only wish I had that.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you joining us here today.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So my father-in-law, when I first started this thing, said I had to tell a joke. Mm-hmm. And he since we started this, said, your jokes are a lot cleaner than what I expected them to be. But you, coming from the background that the audience will get to hear about, I thought this would be appropriate. Who is the leader of the Kitty Communist Party?
I have no answer. I'm not sure, Jeremy.
Chairman Meow.
That's a really good, clean one. Yeah. As my son is I got to give props. My younger one is turning from 12 to 13 today. So it's his birthday. So
today?
Yeah, that's a good, clean one for him. Yeah. For moving into teenage years, which now that doesn't exist anymore. Clean jokes, right?
No.
From a seventh grade mind. So happy birthday, John Ellis. Yep. I want to say that. So thank you for starting us off so cleanly and, ethically, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Now, John Ellis, you might want to go ahead and hit the pause or stop button because no telling what's going to come out of Dad's mouth from here, right?
For sure. Yeah. No, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. I know that I don't know how you got to doing this, but I've come to really enjoy podcasts just because I think it's like essentially the last morsel of time people have is to just sit and listen to things. And I think it's great that you did it and you kind of, like geared up and got the guts to do it because it's not an easy thing. I was nervous before coming on here, and I think that probably doing the show took a little bit of going over the edge a little bit. So good on you for doing this stuff for sure.
Well, first off, it doesn't seem like there's anything when Joe Exotic is the most trending thing on TV, the Lion King, what we've learned is there's really just nothing of value to watch on TV anymore. And you can't even go to a movie, right? Because Hollywood aren't putting out any movies, theaters are shutting down or have been shut down. And so, and the listening, and my wife has been a big podcaster for a long time. She listens to murder stories, right? Yeah. Now, so here's the funny part. She couldn't wait till the day I did an early retirement to get out of the police department, but all she does is listen to murder stories, right?
But that may be by design. My wife watches the Dateline constantly, and it's like, are you trying to learn something here? This is how people
a predator.
They just, it's like how, somewhere this is like very interesting for a reason, that kind of thing. So.
Man, it is. And the thing is it's in a very censored, controlled world and very skewed, right? Like you could take the same piece of information, put it on MSNBC and Fox News, and you're going to get two totally different transitions out of things, right?
Yeah.
So this is the one place where you could still be, as you could call it, non-fake news, non-fake content, just real stuff. And it was one of the reasons why we decided to do video.
Yeah.
It's because we wanted to add that video component to it in case someone would rather watch this stuff on there.
Well, and I think that it brings the conversation to life a little bit more, right? I mean, you don't know how much is being edited out, and then in this manner, you can only edit out probably so much in the flow of a conversation. So it does, I think, keep people in a bit of a live sequence, to where they gotta actually communicate with each other face to face like this. And I mean, I don't know if we do that, much anymore. It's funny you talk about those shows though, because I was playing golf with a guy and he said, yeah, I mean, at the beginning of all the COVID stuff, and he's like, what are you going to do? You're going to sit around and watch Netflix all day? And I was like, he's like, you can't do that. And I totally agreed. I mean, if you look at some of the themes on some of those shows, like the hit shows, like, and I don't know, is it okay to name some?
Dude.
So,
hey, listen. All right, listen. We're not that cool yet, or we're like getting like paid gajillions of dollars for sponsorships.
I don't know how
you can throw out whatever.
But you look at things like, I mean, the first ones we watched, Ozark, Narcos, like all this. There's so much like betrayal in there. There's this crazy dynamic and dark dynamic of like families really doing really evil things and stuff. And it's true. It's like you can't sit and watch Netflix all day and then go out into the world and say, oh, I'm going to have a positive, good day. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of things on there. I mean, the documentaries are great and that kind of thing, but some of the shows that they've created that catch everybody, that everybody's talking about, they deal with some really, really heavy themes in humanity. I mean, it's just, it's kind of crazy. And you think about these young writers out there and it's like, boy, what happened in their lives, to bring this stuff into the writings of some of these shows. So I always try to look at that kind of like the story behind the story. It's just like, what is behind the layer of this? Sometimes too much, but that's just the way my mind works.
So do you think some of these shows are an accurate story of some of the things going on in the world right now?
Yeah, I always question that, right? You're like, how much is truth and how much is fiction? Because kind of coming from the world that I come from, and kind of where I've been the last almost 20 years in politics, you've seen this rise of drama in it, right? Like drama, it sells. I mean, people love it, and you could see that in working in politics as well. I mean, the excitement comes from not the bill that moves through the process that's good for everybody, that everyone jumps on board on. It comes from where there's some real tension and some real differing views on that. It's, it's back when the Real World first came out, right? And everything happens on the cutting room floor, but that was the first kind of reality show of our generation, or that we watched. It was like, oh, the Real World, and you'd watch and wait in these episodes, and really what they honed in on was like, let's get these people like super liquored up, and let's get and then let's get some drama going. Like people love drama, and they love just fixate on it. So I do think that as a reflection of the world, I mean, I sometimes question how much of that stuff is influencing the way we're acting, or how much we're influencing by creating that stuff,
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that topic up because alcohol, for some people, can either be what I call the true serum or asshole serum.
Yeah.
Both being the same, right?
Yeah.
Someone that doesn't really think that they're an asshole, but everybody else knows they are, but whenever they drink, it really comes out, right?
Sure.
And you're just like, hey, by the way, that's who you are.
Yeah. Right. For sure.
Yeah. And then, but so you and I have known each other for about a decade, and we met up at the Fort Worth Club. I mean, just naturally how the Fort Worth Club is, you just get to know, I mean, there's only like 2,000 members of the club, and, here in downtown Fort Worth, and you and I got to know each other over the last number of years. And then we also had friends that were in the same circles and everything else. And then I want to say it was about 4 years ago, because you and I have had some pretty big bar bills up at the Fort Worth Club.
Yeah, for sure.
And one day I was like, let's go get a drink. And you were just like, well, I'll go join you. And I was like, would you get arrested or something? What happened?
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's always a story.
Sure.
Generally, people want to say there's a story.
Right.
And you said, man, I made a conscious decision that I wasn't I wasn't going to drink anymore.
Yeah. So you jumped right into that, man. There was like, you're not going to even let me explain my professional background or anything. I thought,
no, nobody cares about that. I just want to hear the good stuff.
So that's like the alcohol thing. It runs hot in my family, real hot, like lineage is up, and I think that looking at that and always knowing that, it was always like, I got to be careful, that kind of thing. And my wife and I just got to a point where it was like, is this really working out? Our kids were getting a little bit older. And what I didn't realize what I was doing, it was like this real trickery for me, was that I thought that I was alleviating something that I was actually creating more of an issue, and it was like, but it's kind of what they say about smoking cigarettes, that you smoke and it calms you down, but really it's a stimulant, the same thing. And it worked that way with a lot of the anxiety and things like that. And then I started realizing that, I was going down to the gym there and I work out like an hour a day, and this and that. It's like nothing was happening, I mean, it was just, and then I started kind of doing more of a study on it than anything else. And really kind of reading about kind of the physiology of it as along with the psychology of it. And there's a bunch of like great studies and stuff. But as you well know, I mean, it's not the trend, it's not everybody's kind of doing it. Although I do see a little bit of more folks kind of saying, maybe that is part of this. There's so much information out there now and stuff like that. So it was really kind of timely. So, we kind of decided to throw in the towel, if you will. And then, like I said, it runs pretty hot in my family. A year later, I got a call and I had seen my brother had been coming into town and we're super tight. And I have an older brother, I got a younger brother, and we just kind of always ran together. We just always, and it was always partying together. I mean, we just really enjoyed it. And we're the guys who during the holidays would, just love going to the restaurants together and the bars and stuff like that. But the times my older brother would come in, he looked kind of jaundiced. Like I was a little bit concerned about it. And then I got a call, like we were all supposed to go out to California to get together. And like 5-6 days before, the week before Thanksgiving, I got a call. And it was my cousin who lives up in Denver with my brother. She's like, hey, your brother's in the ICU. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? So essentially my brother just kind of took a turn and he has cirrhosis, I mean, it was just crazy. Like, so he pushed it to another limit. And there was this real sense of gratitude, and still is with me, is like, man, I know the way that I would have dealt with that had I not made my decisions a little bit before that. When big dramatic things like that in life happen, you tend to choose one way or another. And in those situations, it's really hard to make that decision like, oh, I'm going to do away with booze, because of what it did to my brother. So there is this aspect of all of this where it's like, you do things and you don't necessarily know why you're doing them. You just have this faith that you're doing them. You're like, maybe this is just the way. And they're real hard to do. Like, it's not an easy deal, I remember there was a time when my younger son or my older son was upset with me, and he's like, he's getting upset. And he's like, why, this is why you don't have any friends. It's like, no, the reason I don't have any friends is because I quit drinking 4 years ago. Okay. Like, I mean, you got to understand this, buddy. It's not me, it's this. So, no, but it was really cool. So my brother's still alive. Like he pulled through that, and I'm super grateful. I talk to him like every day, and it's an awesome thing. Like, it's like we're exploring this new world together. And a lot of that was fueled by where a lot of my energy source for it. Man, I've been using resentment as a fuel source for a long time. And in politics, it is really good fuel source, right? And if you can use it and use it effectively, it will power you through the craziest of times. And so I'm really having to learn myself how to unwind that a little bit, because what you realize as you're raising children, as you're trying to prolong a marriage, and my wife and I celebrated our 20-year anniversary in May. It was a COVID anniversary, so like it was kind of good as far as like not a lot of pressure. You can't do this huge trip, during that time. So I got a little bit of a pass right there, but you see these things and you start, really kind of going, what, is the thing that I'm fueling myself on the best thing? Is it really happiness? Is it really like doing all this stuff and all these motions and like the drama of politics and da 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 da? And it's like, is it getting me to a place? And so in a way, the COVID stuff has kind of given me a real chance to step back and reflect, and make me really grateful for what I have, like people in my life, like our friendship and a whole lot of friendships that really say, it doesn't matter what you're doing necessarily, as long as you're doing it and doing it with your heart and doing it as best you can. That's the way, in my opinion, things should work, right? Like when I go to lunch with folks and hang out with them and do these things, I do that because I enjoy being with them. It really doesn't matter to me that much how much they're making or not making and things like that. I mean, everybody gets influenced by that to a certain extent. You want, obviously, you want people to be doing good things for themselves and that kind of thing. But I think that what it really showed me was like, there's a whole world of just being a good guy, like you can do that, right? And I think in this time where we are, that somewhere needs to prevail. It's gotta push through kind of all this tumultuous, craziness. Like, that was the thing with my older brother. We had grandparents who were real influential in our life, and I had to speak and I chose to speak at my grandmother's funeral. I was like, man, what do I say? We're like going up to New York City, like this is a big crowd, like I don't know. He's like, just speak from your heart, man. Just be a good guy, and it's really, if you're that, it kind of, the fear stuff goes away. It just kind of is like, well, if I'm being a good guy, and everybody pretty much knows what being a good guy or like, then you do that. And I'm not saying that I'm always a good guy. Like I'm not a good guy sometimes, like, let's be honest. Nobody has.
Wait. You mean to tell me that you're human?
Yeah, right. So there's that human thing in there.
Yeah. Well, and so interesting enough, I end every one of my podcasts with, what would you go back and tell 22-year-old self? And so far, we haven't had anybody say the same thing, which is really good because it's really candid answers. And someone had asked me, he said, what is yours? Mm-hmm. I said, man, if I could go back and talk to 22-year-old self, it'd be not to treat my body like a septic tank, right? Because you feel like you're invincible, made of Teflon, and then you get to our age, 50?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Creeping up on me. Mm-hmm. And the body just hurts.
Yeah.
And then you start, it's really funny because at our age, you think about a lot of things that you would never thought you would ever think about, right?
Yep.
And so to your point of, friends, you're like, yeah, I don't have any friends because none of them were drinking. And it wasn't that you were uncomfortable around them. They were weirded out being around you, right? So, and I've learned in the last year that there's really a lot of people in my world that in the last couple of years are just for no reason. I mean, it wasn't an arrest. It wasn't a DWI. It wasn't a health incident. It was just a conscious decision to go, man, I just, I didn't understand what I was really getting out of it. And now this hasn't stopped me at all because Marine Corps birthday was this week. Mm-hmm. And trust me, I didn't take that advice that I would have given 22-year-old self.
Sure.
And, but one of the things that my buddy Mike said is he said, and this is a guy that makes a ton of money.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, he's probably lost more money than an entire city would ever make, right? Mm-hmm. And he just thought one day, how much money have I spent on alcohol? And he just kind of started not even like running the numbers, but just, because you're especially, when you're in the business world of lunches and drinks and dinners and wine and good scotches, bad scotches and all that. And he just said, I looked at it and he goes, and it's not that I needed the money, but I just realized how much money I probably spent in half a decade on alcohol, right?
Yeah. So that kind of came to me. So just real quick, graduated from college, came back here, worked at an ad agency, had to go to Dallas, right? Like it was the .com, right? Like I had to get out there.
What year was this?
This was like late 90s, early 2000.
Okay.
So like around 99, about that. Go to Dallas, big is GTE internet working, 24 years old or 23 years old, whatever. And you need to go sell like $1 million products to these guys who are like 50 something years old. Oh, no problem. Right. Yeah. We have zero to share, it was a crazy time. And I was going to Austin a lot for that. And so it was good, though. It was a year and a half of like learning how that big corporation works, that kind of thing. Well, then the bottom drops, right? I mean, then, there's 9/11, but even before 9/11, there started to be this significant slowdown with that. And so,
when the dot-com bubble busted.
Yeah, and we were selling like big T3s, like big internet lines and things like that. And so when that happened, I mean, everything just contracted. And so I kind of went for a period of time where like this COVID thing where it's like, whoa, what, like real self-reflective, what do you do now? That kind of thing. And a friend of mine had been working in Austin who I had met up with one of those trips that I went down for. Genuity was the name of it, was GTE Internet Working. And he was working at the Capitol and he's working for a state senator from the Arlington area. He said, and so he had just run this other guy's campaign here in Fort Worth. And he said, I ran the primary. He's like, do you want to run the general election? I was like, I mean, I didn't know police chief to county judge. It was like, what is the state senate? Like I had zero clue. Like I went to a school where politics were pretty big. Winston Churchill spoke there, did the Iron Curtain speech. And I mean, that was like, that's cool. We can play Frisbee golf through the, pieces of the Berlin Wall. I mean, that's a hole on our little, so it really was not that frontal lobe for me. And I was like, I don't know. So we ended up, he helped me out and I ran it. And then the guy said, why don't you come down to Austin for a legislative session? And so I went down and I did the 2003 session. And it was a lot like this legislative session we're about to go. Big budget shortfall, education funding looming. This, at the end of that session, I didn't stay for the special sessions, but was when all those folks went up to Oklahoma and, there's just a big stalemate and the Republicans had taken the House and there's just a lot going on. And at the end of the day, I am quite a curious guy and it was pretty amazing to me that this whole world existed that I had no idea of, because I probably wear blinders a lot more than I think that I do. And so I learned a whole lot about politics being down there and things like that. And it was a rough session and there were those 3 special sessions. And so I got back up here and I went and started working for another legislator in the area and worked there for about 3 years. And then at that time, then the next cycle kind of started. The guy at the Fort Worth Chamber was leaving to go work for Chesapeake, Barnett Shale stuff. And then, so I took his place as the governmental affairs person at the Fort Worth Chamber, which was great. It was like super network building. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. But the first thing, that I sit down in a meeting that we're taking on is the police meet and confer issue because it had just been passed.
Now, is that when meet and confer first came to the PD?
So they just got the ability to go do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, Brinton, welcome to the new job. Yeah. You're going to go against all the police.
For the listeners who, maybe because they may or may not know what that means, is what is meet and confer?
Their ability to essentially negotiate their contract, right? Okay. And it gives them that ability. And it does, it just, gives a playing field that some might say is not level, but obviously police would say is level, to go and do that. And the fire got collective bargaining. So all of a sudden,
collective bargaining, that's a different thing.
Yep, that's for the.
So what is collective bargaining?
Well, the meet and confer. Some argue that meet and confer might be a little bit more stringent, like a little bit more teeth in it than a collective bargaining. Both are the ability for these groups to come and negotiate contracts with the city.
Gotcha.
And so, and I don't want to.
And is that something that you can automatically get, or is that something taxpayers have to vote on that you have the ability to go do?
Yeah, it's a legislative issue that. And look, with all government things, as slow as they are, and I'm a pretty impatient guy, there is a reason for them, right? And there is a reason that they sit out the way that they do. And there is a reason that we go and vote for them. I mean, it's civility, right? It's just that, like, this is a way that this thing works so plenty of people can give their input. So he left, and I was like, this guy's a genius. Like, now I'm going against these, police groups and things like this here in our own town. And it was when the business community felt that the pension issue was really broken and that that we needed to. So, I really at that time was like, boy, how am I going to manage that? And then that quickly, I wouldn't even, it took its place in the history books, and then a big water issue came up. We were staring right at we were in a drought for a long time, and the way that water works with the state of Texas and where the region we sit in, and how we get water in big metropolitan areas, and how
is that? So there's a lot of listeners that are
we're
from all over the globe.
I think it's 16 regions, and we sit in a region that we have agreements with East Texas, as the water planning moves forward in the future, where we will get water from other areas. But the folks here locally have done an incredible job of managing our water supply, and really, conservation efforts have really taken way. And this, not this huge ability or need for building giant reservoirs. If you think about it, Texas has only got one natural lake. All the rest are dammed up.
Which
I believe it's Caddo over in East Texas. And so so much, and water is still like looming on the horizon. Like, you look at California and what's going on, and you look at some other places. We've lost our attention to that with a lot of other, in your face things. But water is still a really big deal. And there's a lot of water stuff and water law that goes around and things like that. And so so it was really nice. I was able to learn a tremendous amount about that, about kind of economic development incentives, about education, how it's funded. Like this whole thing has been this like wonderful education on stuff that a guy like me would probably never really be interested in.
So would a fair question be that the average citizen probably doesn't even have a clue of how much goes on behind the scenes to either gain and lose control of things like water and meet and confer and education and all this, that there's a lot of assumptions of, oh, okay, well, this will just work itself out. And there's actually a lot that goes behind it, right?
If you think about where American society has been looking, which coast?
Yeah.
Everyone's been looking at the West Coast for a long time. Yeah. Hollywood, what are the actors? It took something, maybe the pandemic, maybe it was brewing and just, with the presidency. Who knows what it did. But finally, people started looking to the East Coast and looking at D.C. and what's going on at a federal level and a state level. And I'm not going to say I know all the reasons why this thing bubbled up the way it did. But what was, if you can look at what happened in the election recently, the optimism there is something like 1.2 million more people got out to vote in this state. Our voting numbers, for as great of a state as we're in and how well we take care of it, compared to other states, we still had really low voting numbers. Like people getting out and voting, I think shows exactly what you're talking about, is this this awakening of, wait, I would like to kind of know what's going on here. I'd like to get a little bit more involved. And that cuts both ways. That cuts with not only the people who are against some of the things that government's trying to do, but it also goes with those who are trying to support it as well. Because, what you really see very quickly is that a lot of people will be incredibly outspoken on the things that they're not for. But very few people will say, I'm for this because I take this road to work every day and I get there 30 minutes faster than I would have, or because I, have a fresh, reliable source of water every day. It's real hard to get those supporters to do that.
So it's really interesting having a snapshot of what's going on outside the immediate barriers, right? And so, for an example, I'm working on a deal with an agent out of Denver, Colorado, and she's from Belarus. And she and I were on the phone earlier this week. You know this about me, but I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, not because I like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Actually, I'm probably the least
I asked this guy about that. I said, why do we get up so early? And he goes, fear. It's straight up fear.
It's straight up fear.
And I was like, no, I think it's because we're in. He's like, no, it's fear.
Fear. No. I'm going to write that down, fear, because that is exactly what it is if I don't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do my routine, by the time this phone starts blowing up at 7, 8 o'clock, I'm never going to do all the things that I did before then. So it's the fear of not getting things done. But part of that is keeping informed, right? I don't watch the news. I think that whatever channel you pick skews it towards the audience.
Yep.
And it can become a lot of times very much propaganda and, hey, buy gold, right? Or whatever.
Right.
And so, but I keep myself very, very informed. And I have a number of publications that I read through, and one of them being Geopolitical Futures with George Friedman out of Austin. And I had just finished over the last couple of weeks reading a bunch of things on Belarus. So here it is, this agent, and then I find out she's from Belarus. And I was like, hey, y'all got a lot of things going on over there. And she goes on to tell me that they have restricted the ability for public reporting, that the only way she knows what's really going on is her friends that are posting things on Instagram. And she was like, and I don't even know how long they'll allow that to go on. You hear something like that and you go, what? Wow. Like that still exists in this planet that doesn't exist here. Now, regardless of what you want to call it, fake news, skewing the result, right? Whatever, right? But there are places that you don't have the ability to exercise your vote. And if you did, they might just throw it away.
Yeah.
What a lot of people are accusing going on right now.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of areas in this world. But people are so in tune with what's going on within an arm's reach that they don't realize, there's a lot of frustrations of what's going on in our country right now. But guess what? There are other countries that would beg to have our problems in exchange for what they're dealing with, right?
Sure. Yeah, you look at how many people are still coming here, right? Like, I mean, of all walks of, like, from all areas of the globe, right? I mean, it's still, if you talk to folks who are not from here, you ask why, they're like, it's the best. Like, one time we were down listening, we were in Antigua and we were listening, and I was like, all they're playing is Bob Marley. Like, you'd think that there would be more like reggae, like, since this guy like died back in, like, and I asked the guy and I was like, why Bob Marley? He's like, it's the best, man. Like, I mean, it's just the best. I mean, it's like our country, it's just like, why do you need anything else? Like, what's the problem? I mean, why Bob Marley? He's the best that's ever been, it's the same with, I really do feel that way about this country. I mean, it's just, we have so many things, to be so grateful for. And Jeremy, I've not always been this guy, right? Like, I mean, it used to be like, problem. It's like that Ants commercial, it's like expired. I mean, that's me, it's just like, oh, this is a problem. And my wife still gets on me every day, like the complaints, and it's just like, I need a complaint department in my house, but it is this other thing where, if you step back and you look at it in just the things that I discussed, and the ability to build things the way that we can still build them, this state to have some open space still, that exists. I mean, and really humanity. I mean, like, I will say that, I kind of touched on all the roughness and, of the Texas legislature, and you can feel it at the end of the session, like you go in, not many people want to hang out at the Capitol at the end of a legislative session when those bills are moving. Like, there are little things that happen where, legislators either don't give a bill a committee hearing or things like just these moves that start bringing it into a more kind of tense environment. Cause I just kind of measure the emotion, like I'm real emotional. So I just do it that way. But on the other side of it, I mean, Texas does work together really well. Like Texans are pretty amazing in the sense that they see things as a common challenge and they reach across. I mean, if you look at who's the presumed speaker right now, I mean, he kind of reached across party lines and it was more of a unification effort. And in my mind, I think that, a lot of the technology that we have and that we're using, as much as it was created for the good and to increase communications and things like that, and I know it, I mean, I'm not saying that I put the phone down enough, but there is times, I mean, I most recently went to Austin and I actually just did put the phone down and I sat at the Capitol and just sit, just breathe the air. Like, look, I had a few minutes between me and it's just like, it's going to be okay. Just like we're going to, humans will rise again, because it's crazy, but I do think there's a little human versus technology going on right now. I mean,
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more on this. And especially because I've been in over 30 countries. I lived in Romania shortly after the fall of Ceausescu. So when you have a lot of calling the progressives, and look, for any listeners out there, no one knows how I vote.
Mm-hmm.
They make assumptions. As a matter of fact, on election night, I've got a group of guys that I hang out with, and they wanted to go watch, and they're big Trump guys, and they, rah, rah, rah. And one of them, my buddy Jeff, goes, man, yeah. And he says, wait a minute, you never really say anything. And I said, no. And he goes, but I know you voted for Trump. I was like, maybe.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, what? How did you vote? And I was like, well, does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, it matters. And, and I could see he was getting a little wound up. And I said, look, man, you think you know how I voted, but actually you'll never know how I vote.
Yeah.
And he said, why is that? And I said, because for me, this is a very personal thing. It's kind of like when the riots started happening, people knew I was a retired police officer, and they were like, how do you feel? What are your personal feelings towards all this going on? And my response was personal. Sure, I have opinions, and I'm all for people that want to voice their opinions, but I think it should also be respected when someone doesn't want to voice their opinions, right?
Sure.
Is if I felt that me voicing an opinion would move the needle on something, then absolutely I would. But I really feel with technology, right, is it's more of one way than it is two way of doing the things that you and I are doing right here, right? No one has conversations. I mean, I even see it with my daughter, right? Her and her friend are sitting on the couch and they're texting each other, right?
Yeah,
like you're within an arm's distance.
Yeah.
And it's taken away those learned skill sets that we got when we were younger, long before cell phones and everything else, that we learned to talk to each other. But technology is more like when somebody makes a social media post, how many times are they really making it to see, hey, what kind of conversations can we get out of this? Most of the time it is, nope, this is my opinion and I want the world to see it. And if they don't agree with me, I'm going to unfriend them on Facebook or whatever, right?
Yeah. Or like how many times does somebody say, I failed today?
Yeah. Oh,
right. I mean, it's like that's where the humanity side comes in. It's like, and that was the thing is I think about college. I never would have graduated if I had the internet in my room. I mean, it would like the ADD thing, whatever, you want to call it, like just like too much going on. And then I think about, in the Capitol, like that was when those first Blackberries came out. And I remember the guy who worked for that legislator, he had one. And it was the black, like there was no color. It was it wasn't even the blue ones at that time. They were the Blackberries. And I was like,
with the little keyboards on, actual keyboard.
Yeah. And I was like, what do you, and you couldn't get a text off or a message off fast enough for any response anyway. So it really was just, yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, you think about how much technology in our lifetime we've seen. I mean, I was, thinking about some of this influence on me of where this data stuff is really fascinating to me. Because in one sentence I say humanity, technology, but in the other is this data and this craziness of how much data exists out there and how much there is to go through and do these things. But a lot of it stemmed from the movie Beat Street, when Double K, who was the DJ guy, had Radon Chong in his room, and he's mixing all of those things, right? And so that's what we're doing now in hyperspeed with information. I mean, always the music has been incredibly fascinating. I have a small collection of these MPCs, Akai MPCs, which are drum machines, because you can sample, and the way that these guys take other pieces of music and sample it, it's what's going on with data too. And what you quickly realize is if you leave a certain drum beat out, you're going to get a totally different sound, and you're going to get a totally different audience around that sound. And, the same thing exists with information. If I took 150 House members in the Texas legislature and I left out 2, and then I showed you everything, I'm skewing that. So this objectivity of data, it's it's like, well, wait a minute, you got to show it all, to be. And I started thinking about too, because, like everybody, the golden eras and growing up and in college is like, what changed? When I was in college, I would go to my friends, in between like Christmas break and stuff. And we all kind of dressed the same, and we kind of all drove American cars, and we all kind of went to the same kind of neighborhoods and stuff. And I started doing a little research, and I realized, well, one, the lending limits like just went crazy at that time. Like all of a sudden, everybody should deserve everything. Like we should all, like, this was pre-tech, but it was like we should have more money flowing through everything. And then the other thing was the advent of cable news. So all of a sudden, the beginning begins, right? Like all of a sudden, you can watch news all the time, you can listen to the kind of news you want. And the news started popping up, like that little bit of bias that comes out. Well, I'm going to just show you 4 legislators, not 6, I mean, if you think about it and you start watching these things, you're always asking, are you getting the whole story? And this is what fascinates me, is because if you had somebody maybe who is totally against my views and points, I would invite you to bring them in, right? Like, I think that this should be done in this way.
Yeah. So I want to ask you if you've seen this show, and I know the name of it. I'm just trying to, I just knew, oh God, what was it? It was on HBO, and it was called Newsroom. The Newsroom, right, with Jeff Daniels. Did you ever see that?
I know what you're talking about, but I don't think I saw it.
Right.
Yeah.
So anybody that's seen the clip where they're doing like a 3-panel deal, and then he goes into this, what do you really think? And the girl asks a question, and he goes, look, just in case you accidentally find yourself in a voting booth, just know this. And he just rattles off everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, through the series, and so during COVID, right, we went from being empty nesters to our daughter being reinserted into our life, which we love our daughter, but she didn't want to be there any more than we didn't want her there.
Yeah, right.
And we don't mean that because we don't love each other.
Yeah.
She had finally got her independence, and then we finally got our freedom, and then now it was this forced thing. So we watched the series, but on one of them, there's an election going on, and he wanted to do a no kidding, hey, let's really do a panel.
Yeah.
Instead of one of these loaded, we're going to ask questions because it gears the conversation. And he goes into it and almost gets it where he could be the interviewer to interview these folks, to ask the real questions that nobody wants to talk about, or what politicians become very crafty at is you ask one question and then realize you're talking about a different subject because they're very crafty at that, right? I mean, nobody would know better than you at that. But I just thought, how interesting would that be if we, because of technology, we were able to get to a place where people would finally stop being scared enough to be candid enough to ask the real questions, and then that the receiver of the questions would actually respond in a candid nature too.
Yeah.
And
I think that's called vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I don't, and I think, for my personal standpoint with some of the things that I've chosen to do with my life, you realize pretty quick that, you might be the guy that stepped in it on the way in, right? Like, like you're looking around and saying somebody stepped in it, and it wasn't my shoes. And then you look at your own. Well, sure enough, why can't we all laugh at it now that I'm freaked out on everybody? I don't get it, And it is one of these things where, and I think you get older and you realize that, I mean, it takes a little bit of that. I mean, like I said, I've got now today 2 teenage boys at home who I get you on the physique thing where when I would go and work out, I kind of was like good. And now I'm just like not doing that as much. And you got 2 kids that are like, yo, Pudge Master, that kind of thing. Like, so like I hear your pain on that. But I do think that that's really hard to do. And it's really hard when you have so much information coming at you that's kind of pushing you the other way. Or it's giving you examples of how not to do it, right? I mean, like humans follow, these things, and if we have folks who are doing that and leading with a little bit of calmness and able to listen and vulnerability and things like that, then I think that they pick up on it and they see that, I mean, it's just as simple as I was talking to my good friend J.W. Wilson. We go to coffee like every week, and he's like, just being nice, just be nice. I mean, they got those T-shirts, and they used to have the mean people suck, and like this kind of thing, and that means like genuinely being it, not being nice because I need something from you. That means that I walked into Fuzzy's one day, and they'd like write things on the board, the one over on Camp Bowie, and I'll never forget. It was like the holidays, and I'm like stressed out, and just typical holiday fashion, and just like anxiety for no reason, just because family's going to be around. It's like things you should be grateful for. And so I walked in, and the thing on the board said something along the lines like, you have no idea what anyone in here has been through today. So you might just consider smiling and being nice.
It's really interesting what a smile can do, though. Right?
You can't see them with these masks.
No, right now you can't.
But your eyes, you can kind of see.
And that's the thing too is we've reached a point in this country where people are in one of three camps, right? They're either in the left camp and can't tolerate the right, or they're in the right camp, can't tolerate the left, and then you've got I don't have an opinion yet, and both sides are attacking like, you have to make an opinion, you have to make an opinion, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll go with this. Well, then they're angry at you because you didn't choose their side or whatever else, and it's really interesting how this is going on around us, because you're absolutely right. It's like, what happened to just treating people like humans? That opening the door for someone, helping someone with their groceries, Of course, now you can't do that because you're worried about passing COVID and all of that. But these very simple things. So, and the reason I bring this up is about 3 years ago at the Fort Worth Club, they had the Junior Mentor Series. So they have about 75 to 100 members that are under 40, and then they'll bring in, I think it was like 6 to 8 of us that were clearly older than 40, and we're there to help mentor. And everybody jokes around with the millennials of, everybody got a trophy generation, right? Well, when everybody on the panel, which were very, very impressive people talking about all the great things, got to me, I just looked around and I was like, man, let me tell you how bad I screwed stuff up, right? I just went into one thing after another, and then through the series over a couple of months, you would be assigned a table, and the club encouraged the junior members to go meet with the mentors. Well, the club had come to me at one point and said, we've never had so many junior members go meet with a mentor like they have you. I was like, really? I thought this always went on, but they all start off with the same thing. Man, I am so scared to fail. I'm so scared to voice my opinion when it's different. And they said there was such a relief to see someone that has become as successful as you are, and you weren't talking about your successes, you were talking about your failures and how to lean into them, how to learn from them. It's like, I often tell my daughter is, look, the first time you do something wrong, it's a learning opportunity. Now, if you repeat that same thing, then that becomes a mistake. And they said there was even some of them that ended up making some career changes because they were just scared to live with this fear. And I just said, look, it's okay. You're going to be just fine. Like Maggie being in college right now, everybody's like, what's she majoring in? She's a sophomore. What does she major in? I'm like, having a good time.
Yeah, for sure. What you're supposed to do.
Look, you're going to change whatever you're going to do. Pick something you find is going to be, when you go for your undergrad, go there to get the college experience. Go there to get an education. Learn how to learn. Right? But then if you find out what you're going to be passionate about, then go get a graduate degree in that. And then try to go figure it out. And trust me, when you turn 40, you might completely change everything going on then as well. But we've lost that concept of it's okay to disagree. And it's one of the reasons why I don't tell people what direction. They make a lot of assumptions on how I feel about things. And I'm like, look, I'm not sharing my opinion with you because me and a bunch of my friends and people before us and people after us took an oath to protect this country. And we all didn't agree with each other while we were in there.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody believes in peace more than the people that are willing to do violence on behalf of this country, because we're the ones that go in harm's way, not the people with the opinions. Yeah. So that's why I tell people, respect my ability to be private about my opinion, because what I don't want to do is, I've got two friends. One's extremely liberal, one's extremely conservative. And they're always like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I just think that I want to be friends with both of y'all. Mm-hmm. And by the way, each of y'all have your opinion because of people like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, people like my friends that have died in combat. And to me, even more harmful, men and women that have come back missing legs, eyeballs, fingers, and everything else that are physically traumatized for the rest of their life, to be able to afford your opportunity to do this. But it just seems like there's just this growing frustration, this growing anxiety. And I think you're right. I think technology has helped, or not necessarily the word help, but has contributed to the acceleration of that.
Sure. And I mean, part of that is like just and thanks for your service. I probably should.
Thanks for being worth it.
Yeah. Hey, that's a good one. I'd not heard that one, But, the way that the technology thing works is that one of my biggest apprehensions about coming on here is the permanence of it. This is going to be out there, right? Mm-hmm. Once it goes out there, it doesn't go away,
It's out forever.
Yeah. And that is something, even in the political environment, it's you don't reduce certain things to writing, and people, there was a lot done in a kind of a verbal discussion. It was before a lot of this. And look, you got to understand, I'm not saying we need to go back, because you can't go back. What you realize really quick is, even with a piece of legislation, if it cracks the door to this much, it's going to open it, right? This is why they fight over really little tiny changes to the laws of the land, is because they know that if certain things happen, they can really open up. There's a lot of people who operate in the future, and there's a lot of people who will come back and say, we tried this 3 sessions ago, it didn't happen. And then there's ones who are trying to kind of operate right now with what they're given. And I mean, I will say that I thought, government's so boring, da-da-da. They're some of the most creative people I've ever seen in my life. I mean,
really?
Oh my gosh, to do the things that, to get, and that works on the positive too. It's not all the dark arts, kind of thing. But it works on the good side too, the Luke Skywalker type stuff, I mean, and people are very, close to those changes they're making too, which is sometimes a really refreshing thing, that they're all in, right? They're all of their attentions are there, that kind of thing.
So and I don't know enough about this, so this is not meant to be anything other than a question. Mm-hmm. And you having the experience you have in legislation and representing people getting elected and so forth, is when I hear things, and it only on my own ignorance, because I've never really dove in to research it enough, probably because I probably didn't care up until about now.
Yeah.
Is you hear things like the second stimulus package is being delayed because one side of the fence is trying to put things in there that really don't have anything to do with the stimulus. Is that wise because they're trying to open the door for something later down the road?
I mean, I think it comes in all forms. And what I think we often make the mistake of is the coordination of it, thinking that everyone, and I do this a lot too, and somebody, I once tried to present this data solution, and the person, it was in DC, and they're like, what is this, navel gazing? What? I don't get it. I mean, they were totally it was a fail moment, right? It was you're conflating these things, and these words. What I mean is, I tend to take, these things that exist out there and try to push them together somehow. And that is where the data stuff does work, right? If there's enough data here and data here, you can probably make a pretty good assumption that it is the true existence of two entities or things or belief systems or whatever, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of nomers, then there's a lot of missteps that I've made doing that too, and I got to get walked off the ledge a little bit because why? That fear thing, right? Someone's going to do something, and if that person's talking to that person, they're probably talking to, and it can create a really tough environment. And that was where I kind of found myself with that, was just almost not in a realistic state, just always like thinking about, geez, what if these dominoes all hit like this? And then this kind of thing. And I did have one client at one time. He's like, oh, this Brinton, we pay him to worry for us, and he's right. I mean, I do, tend to go through all of those exercises. But then I'm coming to a point in my life where it's like, maybe some things just happen and I have nothing to do with them. Mm-hmm. And no matter if I went and said, don't drink any more of that coffee in there, Jeremy, and you did anyway, like that would have nothing to do with, like, let's put it the other shoe.
Why are you losing sleep over that?
Yeah. And so you do get a little bit further out there. And I think part of that is, and what is really, really difficult is this taming of the ego. Like the ego is a crazy thing, right? Like, I mean, the ego is what gets everyone in trouble, like no doubt. But what fascinates me with the ego is that the ego, in my personal experience, is built solely on insecurity, right? Like the more insecure I am, the bigger my ego and that, fear reaction gets. And I think that's one of the craziest things ever. How does somebody come across as being arrogant and self-confident who's filled with insecurity? Like, it's like when your parents used to say they just make fun of you to make themselves feel better. And it's like, how is that? But when you think about social media and you think about kind of consumerism, like all this stuff, there's no better ego feed. Yeah. Everybody looks better in pictures. Everybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, everybody can write eloquently if they can go back and have the ability to edit. I don't have the ability to edit what comes out of my mouth right now. I should work on that a little bit, I've been told, but see, and filter that. But you know what I mean?
That's the thing that we're losing when you talk about data, right? It's kind of like when I did my MBA at TCU, we were doing finance classes, learning truly to appreciate what garbage in is garbage out, right? So if there's 10 points of view, but you only put in the 4 that match with yours, it doesn't mean necessarily that the other 6 were right, wrong, or indifferent, but is that an accurate snapshot of what that piece of information is, right?
Yeah.
And that's where my fear is that we are losing the ability to check the data for its accuracy because it wasn't skewed. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's why I work with this software called Alteryx. Alteryx, big software.
Tell me about that.
So
Tell me about
that's
Alteryx.
Kind of where I'm moving from. What you just described became it. Look, shoe leather lobbying is always going to exist. You're not going to replace it with technology, even in times like these, in my opinion. Relationships that are built, the way that legislators work as a body in discussion and debate, you're not going to be able to pull away from that. It's what I learned. So I built a platform with some of my money, some of somebody else's money, and really it was without really a customer in mind. It was thinking that, man, if I was Field of Dreams in it, if you build it, it'll come. And it was, and I thought that it was going to be like the best thing since sliced. I mean, I'm already imagining that, like, Learjetting around, this kind of thing, like, I mean, I have an imagination,
Yeah.
So what I did was I tied all of the ethics commission. The Texas has a repository of whose contributions go to who and lobby registers and things like that to vote data. Now, these are real hard data sets to get because the ethics stuff is good and it's in a database format. The vote stuff is not. It's in a journal format. And the depth to data is like PDF, right? Anything in a PDF format is super hard to get. Yeah. But then you can tie them together. And so I found a way to tie them together. And so I could kind of show a little bit of a cost per vote, if you will. But that takes a lot out of intent, interpretation, like all of these things that you can't really quantify, and what I've moved to is things you can quantify. What I've learned is in business, people have balance sheets and they have budgets and forecasts because you can quantify numbers, right? Those are hard things. How much I spent and how much I did or didn't make, that's a hard thing. And data and this Alteryx software work beautifully for that because it's essentially like Photoshop for data. I mean, it's like a DAW, digital audio workstation for data. So for my mind to just going back to Double K doing that mix deal, you can Google it, right? Bringing all those sounds together. You can bring all disparate sources of data together and in a linear place, clean them, get them to match, and do all of those things.
And so this is a program that you built.
Nope, this is one that's anybody can go get off the shelf, but we're consulting around it.
Okay.
So we just really thought that there's a lot of businesses in this area that are small to mid-size that are not as data sophisticated as some. There's some that'll blow your mind, and even governmental entities where it's like, God, how did you guys have a really smart IT guys, or IT person who's built really succinct and great systems. There are a lot of people though who may have a nice shirt and pants on, but you go to my garage and you're like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? Yeah. He's like, this is crazy. Like he's got so much stuff and it's all discombobulated and all this. Well, a lot of people is what we're realizing the same thing exists at work. They have, they're operating, they're functioning, but their competitors who are really beating them are the ones who have their data straight, right? The ones who have a way of doing things aside from the CRM, and some of the CRMs take really good care of them, but we're getting to a point where you should be able to do more with data than you've ever done before too, because of tools like this, because there's this ability to go and get not what the CRM wants you to get, but what you want to get from it. Like I would like to do these things. And you realize that asking the questions is the most important part. Like the one thing, I may not have had the technical ability to do all of the actual data merging and things like that exist around Legintel, but I was able to ask the questions, which I thought everybody wanted to know, but it was kind of clear and evident that not everybody's as into it as, I may or may not be. Now, we are where we are, so that could very well change, but the thing is that you learn from it, and you learn also where working with those data sets to me becomes because of the solution-oriented nature of it. And I got people way smarter that I work with that help with that too. It's not like, Brinton, this kind of salesy kind of guy is the real data cruncher, great, data scientist. That's not the case, but there are, these pieces of software that exist. It's like people recording records at their house, right? Like you used to have to go to the studio and get the label to get you signed on and then go record this album. Well, if you look at the advent or like how much music is out there now, it's because people have all this stuff on their machines at home.
They have access to it.
Yeah. Same thing with data. So this is the same thing. You've got the software, you go through, you do it, you show. I mean, we can show very quickly and easily what can be done. And a lot of it is the
So give me a good example of that, of like who is the consumer. Give me an example of a consumer. And then, is this what you're doing primarily now?
Yep.
Okay. So, and what's it?
And I still do some governmental affairs stuff, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you evolve from working at an ad agency, coming up, helping with politicians and legislation and meet and confer and all these things. And then now
then the data just took hold, right?
Yeah, it just seems like because you were always dealing with data that it naturally progressed you to here. What's the name of your company that you're
Recourse Data.
Recourse Data.
Yep.
So with Recourse Data, if I'm a consumer, right, paint me a picture of who am I as a consumer? Why do I come to you?
Sure.
When I pay for whatever that is, what am I getting in return, and how will that influence me?
Okay, so we come in, and typically it's people who, the really good customers are the ones who know what they don't know, right? They know that somewhere in their day-to-day work lives, they're doing things, and typically it's like around tax and accounting, or it can be around spatial analysis. It can be around a multitude of things in dealing with data. But there are times when the waves are too big, right? It's like I cannot get up It's going to close out on me, right? And they go through them and they manage to get through them with the nimble tools that they have, and they say never again. And then they find themselves again doing it. And where it really presents itself is when people have to hand it down to somebody else, and you're going in and you're like, are you seriously still using this like paper ledger? Yeah. And it's when the new kids come, like when they want to grow their companies or they want to sell their companies, that kind of thing. So we go in, typically it happens in Excel, and they go through and they've got these like horrendous VLOOKUP, like all of these formulaic things existing. And it's kind of like the house of cards, you know, where they just, the one card and it knocks everything over. And it's brain drain. I mean, it is crazy.
So give me a good example of maybe a not necessarily the customer themselves, but the environment they were working in. And they came to you and said, this is my situation. Can you help with this? And you said, yes.
Yeah. So we go in there. Somebody's got an Excel spreadsheet with, let's just say, property values on a real estate deal. Okay. They've got a bunch of appraisal data. Okay. All of that's public data, and it's in these huge data sets. And they are going in one at a time to look at values, to kind of do a self-comp, you know, their own comp analysis. Well, we can extract all of that data at once and then start pulling it out from various ways. And then we can start matching that with other data that doesn't even have to be in that area. So for the real estate example, you've got an address. You say, I want a quarter-mile radius of all the homes, the residential homes in that area, just from the tax roll standpoint.
From TAD?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to look at it year over year, what's going on, to give me a little bit of a sense of what's happening there. We've had folks who are doing all of that in Excel. I mean, they're it's quite maddening. And they're actually going and looking up in the appraisal district website individually, one at a time.
Which is very time consuming, very painful.
Well, yeah, we go back to what's your role in this? You know, are you supposed to be out selling these houses? Are you supposed to be out being the most knowledgeable realtor? Yeah. Or but what this stuff can do, if you're given the right information, is make you smarter, right? Yeah. Like all of a sudden your value goes up because, oh yeah, I know, think about this. You're going to be able to go into neighborhoods and go, this is a good neighborhood. You know the reason? Because the property values went up like this. That means people are in there changing the
So dynamic. You're saving them the time.
But I'm using a tool.
Using a tool that extrapolates the information, puts it in there, and then are you also helping them translate the information and what it says?
Yeah. So the nice thing is it can work a few different ways. Is that we can do that and furnish information to them, or we partnered with Alteryx, so we can also help them buy a license themselves and then help them get on board with it. Just like what happened to me. Yeah. I was doing all the stuff. I was giving it to a developer. The developer wanted to charge me every time I wanted the information. And I thought, boy, there's got to be a better and a different way, especially when I'm asking this many questions of it. Yeah. I'm having to go through a translator. I might as well just learn the language, right? Yeah. And I don't have to learn programming language. Like that is where I'm saying it's the Photoshop. I don't have to go and have a photo lab and develop every picture anymore. Got it. I can bring a picture in, that data, and I'm able to go through and do it, and it's extraordinarily intuitive. It's like picture. Like, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this stuff it's really powerful and really good.
So let me tell you why I'm fascinated by this. I believe the real estate industry is so antiquated, even with its uses. Like, for example, Texas is a non-disclosure state on what the sale of transactions are, right? Which a lot of people get confused. They're like, well, my tax appraisal says my house is worth this. I'm like, dude, look, tax appraisal and market data are two different things. But I am a information data junkie, right? Because I see the world in ones and zeros, and I believe that if you have true data, the data doesn't lie. And we wanted to differentiate ourselves from other real estate teams. And so now, instead of typically you go, hey, so-and-so, will you come to me and tell me what my house will sell for? And they'll pull up the last 6 months of data and they'll put it in a CMA, a PDF format, and then, put in the little filters, and this is what your house will trade for. And I really got annoyed by that because I'm always looking, where are the opportunities? So starting a couple of years ago, what I started doing is instead of sending the clients a CMA, I pull 4 years worth of data in each of the sheets, put in some formulas where it gives them more of an accurate picture. And because it's got the filters in the sheet, I'm like, look, if you think I pulled in all the data, now I use the filters that show more likely on yours, but now it's adding integrity to the process. Because if somebody goes, well, why was this one trading for higher square footage? I'm like, it was also 1,500 square foot smaller.
Yeah.
If you look at the ultimate trade value, what that house was. And they're like, oh, so you can explain why the data is the data or why we use the filters. But it also allowed us to look at opportunities. And I give you two prime examples. One client was moving from out of state here, was looking at an area in Keller, and I pulled all the data where then, you could shrink it down to which one was closer. In that particular neighborhood they were looking in, I said, look, Keller is going through the roof, but whatever's going on in this neighborhood, it's actually declining. And the numbers don't lie. And I said, and people are selling every 2 years. I said, I don't know what's going on, but there's something going on that when someone moves there, could it be a standard deviation of a coincidence that everybody moves to that neighborhood, gets transferred every 2 years? Sure, there's always that standard deviation. I said, but if you look at the information as a whole, I said, so I would shy away from that neighborhood because if this data serves to be true over the next 4 years, you're going to sell it for less than what you bought it for, right? Then on another opportunity, a good friend of mine I did my MBA with, lived in a pocket neighborhood and not a lot of sales, but when they did sell, houses that were updated were trading in multiple offers, and they were trading in like minutes. So even though a regular CMA said his house would have only been worth X, I looked at him and I said, I think you can get Y or higher.
Sure.
And he's like, but none of them had done it. I said, look, this is more than just this. This is the here's the funny thing about the market, right? You have an appraiser that comes in that protects the bank and says this property is worth this. We learned all that after the bubble in 2008, naturally. But you also, a part of the market that's really interesting is you have people that are willing to pay more, and they're willing to say, I'll waive whatever appraisal difference because I really want this neighborhood and I really want this house.
Yeah.
The data showed us that people really wanted that neighborhood. And the data showed us that they were already overpaying for it when they came in. So I said, let's list it at this. And I think because I wanted to trigger multiple offers because I was looking at that data. And I said, and here's what I think we're going to hit. And he said, there's no way we can get that for this house. I said, just what do you got to lose? And he said, nothing. He was being transferred back to a family company. He was being brought back there to be the new president of the company. So we did it. And it was multiple offers. And one agent who I think is a very good agent reached out and said, there's no way that it could be this. And I said, it is. And I even sent her the spreadsheet. But because she's been so conditioned to look at a CMA, it just was like mind-blowing, right? Just went right over her head. And she was just like, there's just no way. So sure enough, we did. We took an offer that waived appraisal, and they got tens of thousands of dollars more than what they expected to get for their house that they had only lived in less than 3 years.
Yeah.
And he was just like, holy cow. So now what that has done is from that point, we've evolved into a process where we have a spreadsheet and we've taught the team to extract the data, to put it in there. And we've even evolved it more where it's even cleaner, where if you don't want to look at all the ones and zeros, just look at the first tab and it'll give you this is it and why. And then as much as you want to dive down that rabbit hole, you're more than welcome because here's all the data. But what it was doing is we were creating an integrity to the process to say, I'm not just going to show you 4 out of 10. So that way you do what I want you to do. I'm going to show you all 10, but I'm going to show you why I think this.
Sure.
And the trust of the consumer is going through the roof because they're like, man, no one's ever shown me all the data.
Because what are you doing? You're showing them the good and the bad, right?
Showing the good,
You're not
the
just
bad.
saying this is a nice ceiling. This is like, you're saying something's going on in this neighborhood. So I'm fully on board with like, start looking at permitting data, start looking at everything going on in that, right? Like get as much of the whole picture as you can. And I guarantee you that, I can make it a cleaner and simpler way of doing it than you're doing it now. Like there's just the way that this software works.
I will make a note here.
Yeah.
Michelle, call Brinton.
Yeah, and the way that it is.
Save us more time.
Sure. Well, you just run through. And what I like is it's very flexible in that some people, they're not willing to give up their data. There's some people that come in this podcast and they're like, I'm not telling you. I'm not going to tell you. And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And for that exercise, there's ways around that. If you want to hold on to all of it, if you want to anonymize it so we can do a workflow, like whatever. But the deal is that you got to get control of your data because the guys who are winning right now, they got real good control of their data.
Well, and there's something to be said about this, right? So the real estate industry is so antiquated where this is going to sound like a crazy number. I think that in 5 years, 85% of licensed agents will be out of a job. Mainly because of what technology is doing. Mm-hmm. And agents have lost the trust of the consumer. And what COVID did show us is that technology that we thought we had wasn't as good as it really was. Yeah. So someone is sitting in a basement coding right now, creating something that will fill that gap where you are going to have still some boots on the ground to go out here and do things. But when we saw this before COVID and we knew we wanted to build a brand around trust is the currency of business. And that's why you come to us, because people lost the trust for a lot of agents, but they used them because they just didn't have time. Yeah. Well, COVID created a gap of, wait a minute, now I had time to go learn this stuff. And someone's going to write a code that saves people time. So we were like, look, you can come to us because what you're going to get is you're going to get the truth. Yeah. Right? That's why you come to us. If you're looking to be told what you want to hear, go to the next team or go to Zillow, go to wherever. But we're here to tell you this is what it is and the data doesn't lie. Sure. And when you create a brand around integrity, then that becomes huge. And creating a brand around, guess what? We're not just saying that the client is the most important. We're demonstrating that the client is the most important, right? Building that trust. And so that's why I love what you're doing. And when you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, you got to come on my show. And you're like, oh, I got like 50 things to talk about. And I says, well, I can actually see you being a repeat guest on here because this is stuff people really want to listen to and learn more about, because we've now crossed that threshold. As like you said, we're not going back, right? We're moving forward, and there's so much ambiguity on what that frontier looks like. Sure. That people with your business are going to be in even more of a high demand, to where even, okay, you can mine the data for me, which saves time, but I don't even have time to learn how to translate it, where I can see where you're going, okay, this is.
Well, and it works well because there's a lot of public data, and that's kind of where I came from, right? Yeah. You'd like to have the ability and knowledge to know how to kind of find some stuff at a public level. And I mean, it's just that understanding, kind of that civics lesson that we talked about before is, I mean, it's really important. You know, people should know how governments work. I mean, and study that and believe that for themselves, not what they're being told, what government is doing to them in a kind of a shape-shifting manner, but to really to go and understand it. Look, I mean, our city and our county, they meet every week. You know, there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that, you know, that folks, you know, they can tune in. I mean, if we're in COVID times, they're at home where they can watch. And I think more and more people are doing that in this time. You know, I mean, I think this has provided a really good slowdown and prioritization for a lot of folks with that.
What I call a fake parenting.
Yeah.
So, you know, now you saw everybody out because they couldn't go anywhere, riding a bicycle with little Sally, throwing the ball with little Johnny, doing the nightly walks. And people get mad when I call it fake parenting. I was like, look, here's the deal. The reason I say this is you didn't do that before. You're doing it now. It's not fake parenting if you continue it when when you go back to work.
Yep.
Then it doesn't become fake parenting. And by the way, don't become a fake parent because you will have really just confused the world out of your children. But hey, wait a minute, you weren't really around to do these things. Then you were for a small period, and so you teased them, right? Because people want that attention. They want that be nice. They want to have that interaction no matter what technology is.
Yeah.
So with you being involved in politics for whatever, 20 years now, right?
Yeah.
God, boy, that just started dating.
Yep.
I saw that little look of like, I feel like I'm dated a little bit in that.
Sure.
Where we are as a country right now, right? And I'm not looking to get the perspective of the left or the right or the center or anything else. It's just after you being on this planet for almost half a decade now, right? Right around there.
Yep.
What are you now?
Almost. No, it's 47. So
47, right?
Yeah.
You're right there with me. That's right. You're okay.
Yeah.
So you're 73.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So you're in our same age. So where we are as a country right now, are we going to move forward out of this?
Yeah, no doubt, right? No doubt. I mean, look, change is hard, right? Like self-change, it's not easy. Like there's this great song by a guy named Jason Isbell, and it's called, it's something to the extent of, it ain't easy, but it's easier, like these things are not easy. I mean, and, we are always being told that it's easy. People amaze me in that they're so demanding, but they want to do so little for it, myself included. I want the world. Remember, I tell you I was going to be on a jet, right? It's like, how are you going to get there? I don't know. It's just going to happen. Like, it's just going to happen, that kind of thing. And so I do think that, I have great faith in humanity that it will prevail. I mean, I really do, and that we will. I mean, this is all very new. Like, you think about where we were in college with technology, like it didn't exist. Like this thing is happening so fast, and I think that we're forced in times like these to look at, all right, what's working for it in some ways and what isn't. And it's hard. Like these machines are all around us all the time, And we're not like at our house these like uber strict parents. I mean, we allow our kids to be on it because they socialize, I mean, this is a big part of their social makeup and stuff. What amazes me is their behaviors and how much closer to home they stick than they were before. I mean, when I was 15, I was like, I can't
down the days till I was 16 to get my
driver's license.
I was
in with I was like, could you get a hardship permit? Because then we could be cruising around. It's like, I'm only 13. It's like, well, get on it, man. We can do this, I mean, I had to get out of there as fast as I could. I couldn't stand to be it. So I do think there are things that are good about it, just the presence of having your kids around a lot more and things like that. So, but yeah, I think we'll get through. We're hitting some rough waters right now, but like anything else, man, the sun rises again. The ocean calms down a little bit. I'm a big surfing fan, so I put a lot of those analogies around there.
I have a meeting on the second Tuesday of each month with my entrepreneur organization forum. So there's 9 of us that are business owners, and we get together and we do our thing once a month. And we generally meet at the Capitol Grill down here in downtown Fort Worth, which, by the way, if you need to go to a restaurant that has absolute great service, they do a great job of service. So we finished up because Tuesday was Marine Corps birthday, and I was waiting on one of my Marine Corps buddies and his wife to go ahead and just meet me there, so that way we could have a drink or two and then figure out what we were going to go do from there. And so I was talking to the bartender, and anyhow, her name is Crystal. She's always bartending up there, and she's just super, super nice. And something had popped up on the TV on the news, and I could see her just kind of shake her head. And I said, yeah. I said, it's kind of a turbulent time we're in. She goes, it really is. And I said, because we're at that point now, as Biden's declared to be the winner, Trump is not conceded yet. We've got, 17 states of lawsuits to recount the votes. Nobody really knows. They have assumptions and all this craziness. And she looked at me and she said, what do you think about all this? I said, I think we're going to be all right. And here's why. If there's anything that this country, since we made that decision to become a country, is we prevailed, right? We're tenacious. Right? We're going to figure it out, right? It's not going to come sometimes without some bumps and bruises. But I said, there's been worse times than right now. Go back to the Civil War, right? I mean, that was set to tear this country in half, and we survived it.
Yeah.
And then thrived from that. That's why I look at folks and go, it could be a lot worse. Now, you've got some of the doomsday people that are like, that's where we're heading. And I'm like, I don't really see that, but I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But I do believe that as a country, whether it's the next 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 20 years, we will come out better because of this. Because in my opinion is when transitions happen, like you said, people don't like change. And there's change going on that is going to take us to do things different and be different. And we're going to look back on 2020 and go, wow, that was the year that things really started. That, where we are 20 years after now is like, man, that really started in 2020.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I love to always end by, you've had a journey that when you, from college to ad agencies to legislation to a data company, a lot of evolving and changing. If you could go back to 22-year-old self and say, if you don't listen, and because there's a million things we would tell 22-year-old self, and 22-year-old self got about the attention span to listen to one thing. What is that one thing you say? If you don't do anything else, either do or don't do this, what would that be? What would you tell yourself?
I'd probably say to go and look up the definition of what I find, to be one of the most powerful words in the dictionary, which is grace, right? Like it's this ability to let go, right? Like to simply take it and keep your composure and do it. I don't know if you've ever tried to surf. I've tried multiple times and I love it. There's something about it, but surfing is hell on earth when you're paddling out to get a wave. Like it is so, there's fear, there's all of these things that replicate life. And one of the most graceful things in the world is watching somebody ride a wave. They're like in total harmony with what I think about this. You talked about the giving up some things along the way, which I've done. Well, what I got with that was I got like my mornings and evenings back, right? These most beautiful times of the day. There are so many things that if I had just, and I don't know why I was holding on to so much for so long. I was, and a lot of it was like self-doubt and rejection, like all of these things. And it's like, just let it go. Like, it's going to be all right. Like, stop. You're breathing, we're talking, it's going to be okay. Like, this is a great, thing that I think you're doing. And I think that I think if we had more folks, if, not like do it my way kind of thing, but just to let go of some of this stuff. And especially the stuff in my world is like that I couldn't control, right? There were so many things that they just weren't part of my, video game, right? Like they were other players in there. Like, I can't control that stuff. So I guess let go. You got to also keep in mind at 22 years old, I was living in a tiny apartment over on the west side of Fort Worth. Like the Friday nights look like a 12-pack of beer and Tomb Raider, and then begging my wife to like read the guide while she told me, what to do with it. So, it was a different time for me too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. But that would be it,
That's great, man. Well, so how does the audience find you? Naturally, we're going to put this on the website, myexperiencerealtor.com.
Sure.
And they can go and download this episode.
I think LinkedIn's the easiest. I'll be honest, I'm not the cleanest on like that image department. I got like some of my like LLCs that exist out there, but recourse data, they can just like do that. But then I still have the governmental affairs stuff that I do from time to time too. But the data stuff is just, it's real A to B, it's cleaner. And so.
So they go on there, Brinton Payne, recourse data.
Yep.
And then pulls up, send you a direct message.
Yeah, just me an info. Yeah. But LinkedIn is probably the best. I think everybody probably on your audience is probably on LinkedIn to a certain extent. And then, I hang around downtown a lot. And
Yeah.
so people know where to find me, so even amongst these times. So thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing. And man, I feel like I got an education out of this of things. And that's probably been one of the biggest gratitude things I've had doing this podcast is the folks that have come on that I've known for a long time that I thought I knew everything about. I'd learn something new that just goes, man, this is what makes it cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great format, and I commend you for diving in and doing it.
Well, thanks again for coming,
thanks,
brother.
Jeremy.
Appreciate it.
Do we shake hands?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
You did great, man.
All right, thank you. Yeah.